Welcome to Hashtag with Navguzi Chwanuka. This is a place where we help you unravel social constructs, discuss self-development in line with mental health, emotional well-being, and everything in between that directly or indirectly affects us in the millennial world around us. If you're hearing my voice for the first time and are the kind of person who is not scared of being a better version of yourself even if it requires you to contradict who you were 24 hours ago, consider this your virtual home. I'm your host, Navguzi Chwanuka, and I cannot wait to engage with you in the various conversations. In the last conversation, I don't know, do I say he begged? Or he suggested, why are you rolling your eyes?
I don't take it back, by the way. I don't.
And I was very happy to jump on that. So we have our resident psychiatrist. Hey, hashtag we now go to Chwanuka has a resident psychiatrist. That is Dr. Denis Agaba. And tonight is not any different from what we had for the beginning of the season. Of course, the topic is different. We're going to be talking about postpartum depression from a professional's point of view. Last week in episode 132, we had Obi sharing her experience with postpartum, and I found it wise for us to expound the conversation and have a clearer understanding of what it is, how it happens, why it even happens. And like I'd mentioned earlier, that this is something that was supposed to happen last year. Dr. Denis was also aware that there is something I wanted to build on it. But yeah, things just did not work out. 2023 was just seemed to be fast. But glad and grateful for life. We are here and we are going to have this conversation. So, Dr. Denis, would you love to give us a simple hello and then we introduce the topic for tonight's conversation?
Now that I'm an in-house, do I still need to give a hello?
You don't greet.
Knows who I am now.
You can just say hi.
Hello and hi. It's always beautiful to be back. I'm very, very much of an admirer of the work that you're doing, and I feel very privileged to be a part of it because we need more people raising the alarm in regards to mental illness, mental wellness, our mind. We need to have more and more conversations of this particular kind. So to be part of this for me is golden, I would say. So I'm very excited to be here as always, and I always look forward to these and many more conversations. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to let you take us. I'm going to pass the steering wheel for you to drive the conversation. And for those that may not have been aware of what we are going to be talking about, which I think all of us are, because there is information that was attached to the link, we are going to have a bigger conversation that is following episode 132. You'd have been in a more understanding of it if you listened to the episode, but if you didn't, we could already start from here and draw back to Obi's experience. So, Dr. Denis, take the floor.
Great. The topic of the day, postpartum depression, is a very big concept when you think about it from where I'm standing. It's a very wide, very diverse condition, one that again is not talked about as much as it should be. It was very interesting for me. I got the chance to listen into Obi's sharing in the last episode, and I would really like to applaud her for being very candid about her experience and sharing it. I think many people would relate with what she went through, and it's just good. She mentions this actually, just to know that you're not alone is in itself very, very, very powerful, very relieving. when she eventually found out that she was not experiencing something that was, just hers alone, that there were people out there who were willing to support her, willing to journey with her, it definitely was very, very helpful for her. And that's something very important. So very grateful to her for sharing her story. Mm-hmm. And I thought she'd be here so that we could be able to just touch on a couple of those issues that she raised as well.
I could send her a message, actually.
Very, 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 very happy that she was able to share. So I'll again, the time too little for us to do an A to Z of postpartum depression. So I'll just try to, in very few words, break it down and just try to give us a good picture of what it looks like. And then maybe take a few questions more directly. I find that helps because I may be going on and on about my medical jargon and gibberish, and that may not be what's very interesting. So I always like to just address particular questions. But anyway, just as an intro, when we talk about postpartum depression, this is depression, which is an illness of itself, but particular around the time after delivery, So postpartum, afterpartum is birth, and then depression. So this is an illness of the mind that occurs in mothers who have recently given birth. So it can be anywhere from the time that they've given birth to up to 6 months. That's the period postpartum. So the first 6 months after giving birth is really that time that we look at the postpartum period. So if someone develops depression around that time, we'd call it postpartum depression. What is depression? Depression is an illness of the mind that particularly results into feelings of sadness, low mood, persistent, so you have persistent sadness, persistent low mood, you lose interest in previously pleasurable activity, you tend to withdraw from society, you have no feelings of excessive guilt, feelings of worthlessness and hopelessness, and a very negative perception of the world, yourself, and the environment in which you are. And so really that's what depression is. And when it comes about that time, then we call it postpartum depression. When we think, why the postpartum period, so I'll just focus there. What makes this time so unique that it can, in and of itself, predispose someone to developing this
You are illness? Going to kill me. I forgot to send you the link.
Just to also add there that, you can actually have depression during pregnancy as well.
So we are already in. And we talked about you because Dr.
prenatal
was like,
depression,
thank you so much, Obi. I thought she
prepartum depression.
I think she
So you can have prepartum depression, or you can have postpartum depression. Together, we call them peripartum depression or depression around pregnancy as a whole. There's conditions of pregnancy.
Yeah.
So for all the different aspects of mental illnesses, we like to think about them in a threefold approach, what we call the biopsychosocial approach.
All right, thank you so much.
We have to understand from the biology, so what's happening on the biological front. We have to look at what's happening on the psychology of things, and then we have to look at it from the social perspective of it, okay? And we'll also see that when it comes to how we manage it, it still has to be a biopsychosocial approach to the management. I'd like to think it's okay. Maybe you could just give me clarity on this Chiwanuka, the Obi, Igbo, right? She was telling us that Igbo has an Igbo tech to it.
Why are you bringing things forward? Why are you bringing things forward?
I have to. But I wanted to ask.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask, is it okay if I use her story to just sort of,
You can, because it's already public. We can always draw back to it. I've actually just been on call with her. I had to mute myself and then I forgot to unmute. I just called her and I realized I had not sent her the link. I was like, oh my God.
It's all right.
Yeah. But she's joining us.
Oh, that would be lovely. Mm-hmm. So since you're giving me the go ahead, I'll just be using bits of her story to try and illustrate the things that I'm talking about. here. Okay, so like I said, we have to understand it from the biopsychosocial perspective. Only then can we get to have a proper understanding of this illness. So biologically, we have to understand that, pregnancy is a very interesting period of time, especially for the mother, because her body changes in many ways. Primarily, we have these hormones that are being produced by the placenta. Okay, the hormones that actually allow the body to reorganize itself to be able to take care of this new bone that is growing inside the uterus or the womb of the mother. So particularly, you have a lot of estrogen that is being produced, and it's supposed to be at a particular month for it to be able to take care of the pregnancy. And so you have estrogen gradually increasing, estrogen, progesterone, all these different hormones that have to gradually continue to increase for the pregnancy to be sustained. And what happens once the baby is delivered, right? So once you deliver the baby, the placenta also has to be removed. And so you then see a very drastic drop in this particular chemicals that you're having in the system, because they've been produced by the placenta, but now suddenly they've all been removed. And as they are removed, you have a whole new bunch of hormones that have to be produced, the likes of oxytocin, prolactin, and the like, because now you have to shift from looking after this baby in your womb to breastfeeding and to many of the other things that has to come up. So on a biological level, so much is changing so fast once this baby is born. And that those chemicals, much as they act primarily on the placenta and on these other parts of the body, they also have a very significant interplay in the mind. We know that they have a big role that they play in our moods, they have a big role they play in our cognition and also in how we behave. So that sudden biological switch of these chemicals predisposes women to developing this disorder. Okay, so there is something happening on a biological level. Many times we tend to think that it's just going to be switch and you're out. Obi shared with us, how she thought that the moment my son is born, I should automatically start to be attached to him and to feel all these kinds of things. It doesn't necessarily happen instantly, And this is something, of course, that's not commonly talked about and not commonly expressed. We shall see how that also plays a role. But so much is happening in that time. She had a very long labor, and you can imagine how difficult that was. And then suddenly, to switch, to flip that switch doesn't happen automatically. But there's all these changes, in the hormones in your body. Your body has to go through all these changes to go back to the non-pregnant state. So a lot is happening within that time. And all those complex biological and chemical processes also affect the mind. So that's one of the reasons as to why this particular time is very, very prone or predisposes you to having this particular issue. So we have to keep that at the back of our minds. There's so much happening biologically, changes in this hormone and that hormone, all happening at about that time. So apart from the biological element of it, we have to also look at it from the psychological perspective of it. And the psychology here, we're looking at someone's beliefs, perspectives, someone's, expectations, someone's scope of knowledge, someone's personality. Obi shared with us how, all throughout the pregnancy, all throughout her life, she'd always seen these images of happy mothers with their babies, and how she had never really, she had this picture of what she expected this time to be. She had these already formed images of what it will be like when she has her child, and she told us how she's always been a very inquisitive person, and she's always been, on top of things. She's that go-getter, right? Sneakers and jeans, and she just gets up and runs out at things. So she's already been preparing herself on a psychological perspective. She already had some ideas of what this should be like. She had some expectations, so to speak. And for those expectations not to be met, for her to have now a very drastically different, experience from what she had imagined and expected and prepared herself for. She repeated so many times how no one had ever spoken to her about, the other side of the coin, about the fact that there could be challenges, about the fact that it won't be all sunshine and roses from the day go, that there'll be some low days. She had never conceived any idea around that ever happening. And so that psychological clash between expectations and experience, between what she had anticipated and what she eventually met, also that on a psychological level creates what we call a conflict. And that conflict fuels this kind of illness that we're talking about. But there's also the social element that comes to it. And so the social element now is understanding the culture in which she lives, understanding the environment in which she's been raised. She talks a lot about how, much as she had people around her, she couldn't get herself to speak about it because then you're going to be perceived to be weak. How, the people in the environment talk about, it's not your portion, you can't speak about negative things. How, even with her mother, she couldn't actually have these kinds of conversations because, what do you mean you're not feeling well? How the environment takes care very much of the child. No one takes care of the mother. No one wants to know how the mother is doing. She speaks about how, all throughout her antenatal visits, no one ever stopped to ask, how are you doing, mother? And how are things going? Everyone only pays attention to the child. And so you have the environment in which she's in that seems to turn a blind eye to this kind of experience and doesn't really want to acknowledge or confront it. And that social environment around her, also then precipitates or adds some, catalyzes the process. And so you have a combination of the three. It's important that we understand that all these conditions have to be a sort of combination of the three. You have the biological changes that are taking place, you have the psychological conflict that's happening, and then you combine that with the societal expectations and environment in which she lives. And these three in the right combination are what ultimately will give rise to what we call postpartum depression. Of course, I don't have to mention the expectations that come with having a new child. I now have someone I am entirely dependent on, and I now have to change who I am and my perspectives. I have to feed this person. They can't take care of themselves. They have their own needs. She talks about a bad colic. This child is crying the whole night. I can't get some sleep. I can't. All these challenges that suddenly come up, even just, from the perspective of, okay, now I have someone to look after, and how it's expected for you to just sort of get your stuff together and show up day in, day out without, batting an eyelid. Ultimately, it's that combination of these three things that eventually ends up into someone developing postpartum depression.
Thank you so much for giving us at least what we would consider a background or a clear understanding of a clear image of what postpartum might look like. Because like you had mentioned, this would take like the whole day, I think. Or even there's a whole term, I think, that takes the professionals to have a clear understanding of how best they can help people who are struggling. The thing that I may have, you mentioned the bit of the biological changes in the bodies, but I've also had the physical body changes that weigh down the new mothers as well, where she was thin. She now has to deal with the body changes. Perhaps we're looking at someone who was posing as a model, let me say. And now there's a whole new person that she's looking at in the mirror. And she really has to negotiate with the new changes and come to terms with, okay, now who is this? And there is a whole society as well talking about, you need to cut that. You're so big,
Yeah. As you can see, all these different factors actually come into play. I mean, she, for example, and so the physical changes are quite many. One, and again, lots of challenges come around that. One of the things she actually shared with us is, for example, how she didn't have breast milk for the first 2-3 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can imagine how frustrating that must have been. I expect, I know that I should be breastfeeding my child from day go, but there's no breast milk. No one ever tells you that it will not come immediately. And for many people, it actually doesn't come immediately. That's not something to alarm about. But no one ever tells you that, right? No one prepares you for that. So you have the biological shift from, pregnancy to lactation. So your body is going through so many changes for you to be able to sort of switch off this particular system and then switch on this system. A lot happens in the biochemical level. I'll not get into that. So you have the physical changes that are happening now. Now there's milk, and then, the nipples, cracked nipples, all those different things that are happening and are changing because something that has not been functional now has to suddenly get functional. So there's a lot going on physically. There's a lot going on psychologically, because then you're wondering, why don't I have breast milk? Am I the problem? Have I done something wrong? Am I not a good mother? Because how do I not have breast milk? And yet that's nothing that you could do about that particular situation. So you can see that, suddenly there's not just a biological, transition happening, but even psychologically, and then even socially, because people are going to ask you, how come you don't have breast milk? Your child is hungry. You need to feed your child. Why do you not have breast milk? So all these three things, when they actually merge, is when, eventually we see ourselves falling into this condition. So you have to be thinking about it in that threefold perspective for you to have a very clear picture of what it is.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Agaba. Are there some misconceptions that you would love for us to get clarity on or just throw away for purposes of this conversation?
Very, very true. There are quite a number. So one, people to think that, postpartum depression means you're weak. No, it's not so much about what strength you have. As you can see, it's a combination of very many things, a lot of which you have no control over. The biology, the chemicals that are flowing through your system, you don't have much of a say on what happens when, okay? So this is not so much about someone being weak. It's an illness just like any other, and it's one that we can, if identified early, be able to manage very, very well. Or if we can prepare ourselves adequately, we can actually prevent. I think we shall speak about that as we go ahead, on how do we prevent, and how do we prepare ourselves to be able to overcome something of this kind. So very key for us to be speaking about things like that. So it doesn't mean that I'm weak. It doesn't mean that I did something wrong. It doesn't mean that I'm not a good mother. That's not what postpartum depression is. It's not something that should be kept hidden, right? Obi shares with us how 6 months she was struggling, but no neighbor, no visitor ever got to know what was happening. Between her and her sisters, no one else knew what was going on, and that. So there's this unwritten rule that, you don't speak about what your experiences is or what you're going through, which is not very true as well.
Yeah. And
is it manageable? Yes, it can be managed. It can be treated. Sometimes people think, there's nothing we can do. Let's just sit back and wait it out. No, it can be managed. Does everyone go through it? No. Does it only happen with the first time? Not necessarily. It could happen on your second pregnancy, third, fourth. It varies. Yeah.
Right. And
I'm rushing through it, so you can stop me if I'm going too fast.
You are rapping. Calm down, doctor.
There's so much to say and so little time, but you can slow me down if I'm going too fast.
Here I am. So when we get to have these conversations on, especially we've been drawing back to what Obi shared, but I'm also cognizant of the fact that they are different experiences that people may have, because it might not just manifest from detachment, but rather other things that we might have to consider and look out for as a sign or a symptom of postpartum depression. So would you please at least try to paint for us a picture on that? Some of the signs and symptoms that, a new parent could look out for, or even the people around them, to at least come in as interveners.
Okay, so it's postpartum depression. So it's first and foremost depression. So what you want to look for are the symptoms of depression. Yeah. And if those symptoms of depression happen at the time when this person was in the first 6 months of pregnancy, And that onset around that time, then we call it postpartum depression. So what you're looking for are signs of depression. So it's not just the detachment from the child, but it's all those things that we know we look for when it comes to someone who's battling with depression. So sadness, right? Persistent sadness, or low mood, or hopelessness. Loss of interest in previously pleasurable activity, that's another thing that we're going to see a lot of. Difficulty sleeping or sleeping too much. It's one of the things that will be actually shared with us with our own experience. So you're going to find that you're either not sleeping at all or you're sleeping way too much. Appetite, either low appetite or very high appetite is going to come. Feelings of guilt. So I feel guilty. I feel like I've done something wrong. I feel like I'm not good enough. Social withdrawal. They tend to pull themselves away from people, so they want to be alone, left alone. Very irritable. So small things get them annoyed. And they find that their mood is always swinging from up and down. You'll find that they, poor concentration. They're not able to focus on any particular task. They're finding it very difficult to, keep track of things. I have a child. I have to do certain things, and I'm finding it very difficult to just process what needs to be done when. Oftentimes, they won't even take, good care of themselves. So you find that they're not grooming themselves as well as they should have the capacity to do, not taking care of the home as they should have the capacity to do, not looking after the child as they can and maybe should be able to do. So you find that they're having challenges even with certain things which we would expect to be, or they have the capacity to do or even want to do. So you find that there's poor concentration, they are always tired, that fatigue that is very persistent, even when they've not really exerted themselves, they're very, very tired. I could just mention some of these and a couple more. So really, there's going to be lots. The key symptoms that we know of depression, you're going to see them as well coming up on top of course, the detachment from the child, which is one of the primary symptoms that makes postpartum depression unique, because you have now the child as well in this mix.
Thank you so much for expounding on that. Obi is finally here. Hi,
Welcome.
Obi.
Yeah, I've been listening to my favorite doctor, and I was just like, Dr. Agaba is so nice, so nice to see you again. How are you?
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I listened in, and I was like, thank you. We need more of you to start to change the face of what's going on. Yeah.
Absolutely. I shared the link with some people on my mental health WhatsApp group, and the feedback was fantastic. They listened to the conversation between Abukuzi and I, and some of them said, hey, I had very similar experiences.
Yeah, very true.
Postpartum, and I didn't even know who to talk to. I didn't even know what was happening to me and stuff. So I was more than happy to share my story. Thank you very much, Dr. Denis.
Great. And thank you for joining us so we can actually have this together and expound on it. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Myself with my theories and you with your experience, I think together it will be able to get it home.
All right, so we have been talking about Obi. By the time you came in, we had talked about, actually the time you came in, Dr. Agaba was covering some of the signs and symptoms that could be picked out on for a new parent or people that might be around them for them to pick on and figure out how to intervene. But now I would like to know from you, Dr. Agaba, how important is early intervention? Is this something that could get worse? Because you mentioned in the earlier, I don't know, should I call them sharings, where you mentioned that you don't just say you're going to sit it out.
Yeah.
So how important is early intervention? And how bad can it get if help is not gotten?
It's very, very crucial that we identify it very early and we manage it, for a variety of reasons. And again, we shall talk about how we manage, because sometimes people think that the only management is the professional management, and if you've not seen a professional, you're not really helping. You're not being helped. But as we heard from Obi's story, she received a lot of help, and it was pertinent that she did, because that's how she was actually able to get better. But it's important that we get help. And unfortunately, if we don't get help, it gets worse. It gets worse. And we've seen cases of infanticide, quite unfortunately, but it does happen. Some mothers eventually get into what we call psychotic depression. They start to believe that, their child is the cause of what they're feeling, and they might end up actually hurting the child. It might lead to suicide, as we know, with depression. If it's not managed, it gets worse, and then I don't like myself, I hate myself. Maybe the world is better off without me. And so we've seen cases where mothers commit suicide during this time, or end up killing the baby as well. So that's not something that we can take lightly. And that's what it looks like if it's not managed. It can get to that unfortunate end. Yeah. I know, and interestingly, these are things that we don't like to talk about. Obi mentioned how no one ever talks about, for example, mothers who die in childbirth. But it's unfortunate that even fewer people talk about mothers who commit suicide or who have, infanticide tendencies as well. And we've seen this happen, and it's quite unfortunate, but it can be prevented if identified early and managed early.
Yeah.
Actually, we can prevent.
That's what I was going to ask you.
As well. So let's not even wait for the depression to come. Let's act and ensure that it can be prevented, which it can. It can be prevented if we know what to do, if we're very aggressive, and if we listen to hashtag research work.
Oh, there you go. But for those who are just joining us, especially for this online conversation, Obi, would you please mute one of the devices? It's giving feedback. So for those that may not have an awareness or may not even know what the podcast is about, could you please at least give us a few ideas on how we can prevent this postpartum depression?
Okay, before we go to prevent, I think I would want to first touch on, now that we know someone has postpartum depression, what do we do? How do we support them? How do we manage this kind of condition?
Right.
Can I start there?
Yes, please. Okay.
So like I mentioned, the threefold, right? Biopsycho, social. And there's a biological issue, psychological issues, and social issues. And the management is biopsychosocial as well. So if we've diagnosed this person has a biological element to this illness, then that has to also be addressed. And as such, depending on the severity of the case, we might need to prescribe medication. Okay, so biologically, we might need to give the medication to this particular patient. But like we mentioned, since we know that eventually the body is able to return to the normal state, all these hormones that have been, going up and down during the course of pregnancy eventually resolve or are balanced out again. And that's why you notice that for most people, after some time, they sort of start to feel better with the passing of time, because that biological element usually balances itself out as the months go by. But for some people, that doesn't necessarily happen, and they may need to get medication. Again, we usually do that as a case-by-case basis, depending on the evaluation done by the professionals. They'll be able to tell who needs medication and who doesn't. So it's not really a hard and fast rule that everyone will get medication, but in some cases, we have to give medication to be able to balance out the chemical element or the biological element of the illness. That's one. The second is the social support. I can't underestimate the value of social support. And Obi shared with us just how important it was for her to have her mother around and have her sisters with her. And the role they played is phenomenal. And I think they deserve to be applauded very much for the work that they did. They were able to come and just spend time with her and, tell stories and tell jokes and how they talked about everything and anything to try and cheer her up. They were able to help take care of the baby when she wasn't in position to do so and just provide for the baby's needs, but also allow her to take walks, allow her to spend some time with herself. That was very, very, very much treatment. That was very much therapy in and of itself for her to then be able to get better. So that's one of the social arm of therapy, that support from the people around you, that she was actually able to open up and speak to her mom about it and speak to her sisters about it and have the support of her partner as well was very, very key. And so you need that particular support. That's what they call the social support. Eventually, she tells us about how she discovered these support groups, much as many of them are, were in the UK or in the US, but just having people out there who have gone through the same experience that you have and who are able to just walk with you through it and give you the encouragement and share their own tips of how they were able to go about that particular experience. That's what we call social therapy. It's very, very important and very, very effective in managing many of the issues that come with the illness. Part of it, for example, is just even being able to put a name to what this thing is. Obi shared with us how for a long time she was not well. She was aware that she was not well, but she didn't even know what it was. She couldn't put a name to it. Quite unfortunately, she actually tells us how she went to see her doctor, and her doctor didn't also know what was happening and couldn't give her the information, which happens. I mean, and we have to also, work very much with our, frontline healthcare workers in, obstetrics and gynecology that particularly deal with our mothers, midwives. I'm currently doing some work where we're trying to train midwives and nurses to be able to identify and screen mothers for postpartum depression. So we are doing some work in that particular lane, and we need to do this together to get the word out there, even for our healthcare professionals. Many of them don't know or aren't actually paying attention to be able to recognize these particular situations that may just occur during this time. So that social support is very, 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 very important if we're to be able to address this particular condition. The other arm is the psychological arm, and in which case we need psychotherapy to be able to resolve that internal conflict that comes up in the mind. Obi shared with us how she had this whole other expectation of what motherhood would look like that had been fueled by all the adverts and ads that she had seen and all the stories that she had seen and the expectation that she had. So she had in her mind what this must look like. She already had these ideas, these expectations that I should just be happy. I should love my son from day one. I should, just be excited to look at him, and I should be smiling from morning to morning. And that wasn't the case that she eventually had to experience. And that conflict can be very difficult to unhinge. And you need a professional at that particular point, what we call a psychotherapist, who will be able to help you navigate through the conflicts in your mind and thus be able to correct your perspectives of things. For a long time, Obi shared with us how she thought she was a bad mother, how she thought she was doing something wrong. And all these negative thought processes can be corrected with the appropriate techniques, which we employ as we do psychotherapy. And that would also have helped greatly or helps greatly. So the management of this condition, medication where it's needed, psychotherapy to change our perspectives and resolve the conflict in the mind, and also that support system, that intact group of people that's just working with you and helping you to navigate the challenges, or just even having people with whom you can share freely what you're going through, what you're experiencing. That's how we manage this kind of condition. That's how we treat it and how we can be able to quickly overcome it and actually get back to being very well and very healthy.
Right.
And in line, yeah.
Thank you. I think one of the questions that I find interesting is even showing in the attendance of the live recording, where we have what's this, 90% are men, which I feel like it's more like a revolutionary move to have the men present and have a clear understanding of this kind of topic. And now that brings me to a question of, Does it affect fathers as well? Does postpartum depression affect both mothers and fathers? And if there is anything of that kind, how can a father be affected?
For the father, we wouldn't call it postpartum depression. Okay, at least it's not in the nomenclature that we use. Primarily because they don't have the whole biological processes going on that the mothers have. So we wouldn't, from a technical point of view, describe it as postpartum depression because they don't have that hormonal cyclic pattern, going on at that particular point. However, the fathers can get depression. So we would just call it major depressive disorder, right? So we wouldn't particularly term it as postpartum depression. But yes, men also suffer from mental illnesses. Men also suffer from, the pressures and the forces, relating to becoming a father. People seldom talk about what it's like when you become a father.
For some reason, I feel like they're even ignored. No one asks them.
A lot of the time. I mean, yes, we look at the baby, we look at the mom sometimes.
Yeah.
No one knows where the father is in this world. I know this.
Exactly. Dr. Denis, sorry to interrupt you. Please. A friend of mine, many years ago, after she had her baby, I remember going to the hospital to see her. And the husband was there. The husband, before the coming of the baby, was he was the life of the party, a social butterfly, very happy man. And I just noticed from the minute that baby arrived, his countenance changed. He was miserable. So I asked his wife, I said, is your husband okay? And she said, yeah, he's okay. He's probably just tired because I had a long labor. But guess what? This man was struggling and we didn't know. Yeah. And I tell you, 2 years after the coming of that baby, he took his life. He ended his life.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So men go through these pressures in silence because when the man is struggling and he tries to open up, people say, hey, what's wrong with you? Your wife is the one who went through labor, who went through all the pain. So why you have to be a man? You understand? This man ended his life because there was nobody, even his own wife. Although at the time, in all fairness, none of us knew what mental health was, because this was many years ago. There was little or no information. But his wife was not even paying enough attention to see that there was something wrong with her husband. If for anything else, she was actually irritated that he was, acting up. He was disconnected from her and the baby. She was very upset about it. I just wanted to add, to this conversation about men and their mental health. And how the birth of the baby can also impact the father.
Yeah, it does. Men are impacted greatly, because again, you see, unlike the mothers who have sort of 9 months just sort of born with the child, and also it's a chance for them to sort of get a bit more accustomed to how it is to handle children again. That sort of comes, and then they have time breastfeeding and all that, to just spend time and get the hangs of it with the child, which men don't have that, and yet you're the father of this child, and many times all they want is, go bring this, go bring that. The bill suddenly shoots through the roof, and you're thinking, oh my God, and then no one really pays attention to you. In our culture, what we have now, which I am a big advocate against, is, even the support that I've had from my wife. So usually what happens in this part of the world is the, the mother and the baby go to the, mother of the grandmother. So the mother of the mother, right? The mother tends to go home to be looked after by her mother, right? And this man is left alone. So he's supposed to just figure it out on his own. And then suddenly, he has to go and work. And then when he's back home, the baby's crying. He has to be part of the activities, at home to support his wife. If there was double income, now it's single income. Now he's the one who has to sort of do the running around. And then when he comes home, he's tired. He also has to carry the baby at night, and he's not going to sleep. In the morning tomorrow, he's going to be expected at the office. at the office, no one wants to know whether you have a baby at home or not.
Exactly.
His boss is still expecting 101% from him. So the men many times also crack quite a bit during this time, and it's something that we need to have a whole other conversation about. But yes, we wouldn't call it postpartum depression per se, but it would. Many of them do succumb to anxiety and depression during this time.
All right, thank you. Sorry, thank you for expounding on that. And Obi, that example was quite moving. Mine was, I think, light because I was just going to talk about how I had a new tenant a while ago who he came along, and then later on a pregnant lady joined him. And the moment the child got delivered, this guy grew thin. I had never seen a drastic move as that one. Like, I was like, what? And he has never gone back to the size that I'd seen him in. So we have, before we go forward, I'd like to send a special shout out to the people that are with us on the call. I was going to start with Agaba, Denis, because these are in alphabetical order. We have our doctor on board. We have Elvis Kato, who has just joined us. Faith Agumia has been with us from the beginning. We have Father Gaston Sakala. I don't know where he comes from. Is he Nigerian? I'm not very sure. And then we have Jagaban from Uganda, King Melvin, Moses, Meregura, and then Obi and Petero Mukama. Thank you so much for being with us. So
thank you, Mbuguzi. Please, sorry, I'm very curious as to why Father joined us, because I think I'm really very happy to see a clergyman. Honestly, because why I'm saying this is the clergy must be involved in this topic.
Yes,
the clergy must be involved because they play a very key role. They're stakeholders. And some priests who do not know what mothers are going through will shame you.
Right.
As a mother with a newborn, you're saying to him, look, Father, I'm struggling. No, I don't have any connection with my baby. And he'll shame you without even knowing that he's shaming you. He'll say to you, because I had that said to me, you're ungrateful. Right. So many women die in the labor room. So many women are praying to have one baby. And you have a baby and you're complaining again. Why are you so... A priest said this to me. I'm not even joking. I was very happy when I saw Father here, and I think he had, I think we should hear from Father, except he doesn't want to make any contributions. Father, good evening.
You are muted, Father. But before he says something, I would like to read from Faith. She shared, so eye-opening. I actually thought that's just how I was. Thank you. And then Jagaban was responding to the question of if postpartum depression does affect fathers as well. And he was like, I would like to say that it does. But the psychiatrist has opened our eyes and helped us understand what the difference is between major depressive disorder, is it, and postpartum depression. So Father Gaston, do you want to say something to us? Oh, you have to unmute yourself.
Are you able to get me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, I joined late, but listening to doctor there, I think men are victims as well because they are quite poor in terms of social aspect of their lives. Our women are very good. You find that in a parish, they are able to come together more often. And in such a way, they are able to share their experiences. But when it comes to men, they seem to be so busy with activities of the day. So I think they are dying more inside than women. That's my comment. But I joined the conversation very late, listening to what Doc was saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Gaston. You'll be able to catch the whole conversation tomorrow. It's going to be shared on the podcast.
All right.
Yes, thank you so much. Does anyone else have something to share? Moses, Jagaban, Petero, Melvin, Faith? Moses, I can see your hand up. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Agaba, for this topic, I should say. It's really a good thing that maybe what I can say, men should really get to really listen to this broadcast more, because I was trying to relate what I went through when we were pregnant for our first son. I think that time I really did a lot of reading. By the time my wife was like telling me something, I had already read about it, and she kept on saying, but how do you come to know this? In fact, I knew a lot more than she knew. Every trimester she went into, I was already ahead of it. I knew what I have to expect. Yeah, it's true. Men, we go through this thing, and when the baby comes, they're asking about the mother, baby, mother, baby, mother, baby. But the man, on the other side also, you are affected. One, you cannot sleep when the baby is crying. You can't. You have to be there the entire night, and then you see, I need this, and so that time it's really a very busy time for a man, because you have to be everywhere in order to support your wife through it. So I just encourage the men here and those who will really listen to it, please, to be prepared for it and be very, very supportive, because it's the only way we can help each other to overcome some of these things. Because if you really abandon your wife and the baby, and you say, because I've had men, when the baby starts crying, say, please take away your child, go and maybe in the sitting room, or the man moves from the bedroom and goes into the sitting room. And but psychologically, that is already affecting you, So we need to be supportive in all ways to make sure that this stage, we all come out of it with our minds really straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Moses. Melvin has his hand up. Jagaban had his hand up and he put it down, so I don't know what that means. You brought it back. Melvin, let us hear from you.
Thank you so much. I guess you can hear me. I can see this thing shaking. So that means you can hear me. Yes. Mine is just to say thank you. Thank you to this podcast. Thank you to this host and our doctor. This is the second time I'm attending something like this with Dr. Agaba. So I would like to say thank you to both of you and to the podcast. This is a very, very important conversation. I am a student of psychology, and I've always argued with my friends that before any adult decides to have a child, okay, let's say two adults decide to have children, they should actually first learn some of these things in psychology. I have studied development psychology like 3 times, same course, and these things are online. But it's always very, very interesting to learn how much our bodies go through, not just our bodies, but mostly the brain. Mothers have to go through a lot before they give birth to the child, but also it does not end there. It also affects them even after they have given birth. And for us to have this lesson today, it gives us more knowledge to actually understand that it is more important that we read more before I come here mostly to learn, because I'm not yet a parent, but I know that I want to be a parent and I want to be a very intentional parent. I want to be a parent who's there for not just my baby, my children, but also my baby, you know? Yeah. So what I'm saying is thank you so much for the podcast and to you, the host.
Thank you so much.
Let's continue having these conversations, and we who are able to get this knowledge, let's go out there and share with our friends in our circles, at work, and everywhere we go. Thank you to all of you. And probably this is my chance to say good night.
Oh, good night. Thank you so much for joining us from Melvin. Jagaban, your hand is up.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
I want to speak for a category of young men who have had a very close shave with the issue that we're speaking about. I believe this is also part of postpartum depression. If you can allow me to explain, of course.
Okay.
You know how relationships happen for young people, and I'm speaking from my experience. I'm speaking for one of the relationships I once had. So you get into a relationship. Of course, your intention is not really to have kids, but because of the promiscuity you're engaging in and the carelessness, things happen. Okay. She gets pregnant, and along the way, you're having conversations of, should we keep this baby? Should we not? Mm-hmm. And before you even have time to process the shock of like, what will the family react like? What am I going to do? Do I have financial muscle enough? The baby dies. So I am speaking from my reality. Mm-hmm. And so when the baby dies, I was awoken to I met a whole new person that I didn't actually know I was in a relationship with. And this is what she told me. Every time I look at you, I see my dead baby.
What?
And yes, every time I look at you, I see my dead baby. I do not want to ever see you again. I do not want to live with you. I do not want to think about you because you remind me of a very painful time. So in the extreme cases, this can break a relationship. I don't know if it's part of postpartum depression because she was pregnant before we had time to process it, before the parents knew, before my parents knew, before I had made up my mind, what do we do with the baby? Boom, it's out. So it's a lived reality. I don't know if I'm supposed to release this information, but for my own mental health, I've been struggling with this. I've kept it in for a very long time. So the first time I heard Chiwanuka speak about it, I was like, oh my God, someone finally gets it. Someone finally understands that this is a lived reality. So it's so heavy. It's so hard to deal with, and that's the pain I'm living with right now. It's a lived experience. It's a reality. I don't even know what people do. I don't know where they go, because the person you would normally look to for help is the person who has just told you, and not in a bad way, because they carry the wounds of the relationship, of the pain, of everything. But then their reaction has a domino effect on your mental health. And that's where I am right now. I don't even know. It's something I'm working through right now as we speak. Right now. So that's it.
I'm sorry about that, Jagaban, but still thank you for coming on live and sharing your experience. Faith says sending love and light. Doctor, before we go to Faithy's raised hand, do you want to share something with Jagaban?
For starters, thank you very much, for sharing that experience. It's not easy to be able to speak about things of this kind, but what I can tell you is to speak about it is the first step to actually heal, And so it's very powerful that you did speak about it and don't stop, talk about it. It's very important, very helpful. You again raise an issue that's very, very powerful as well. It's a whole other condition that we have, and we need to deal with. You have a combination of grief, both for you and for your partner as well. What she's experiencing is, primarily grief, but also other forms of psychological distress that will come from an experience such as what she had to go through, which you both have to go through. It gets difficult, but to note that it's something that we have to work through rather than to avoid, and it's important that you get as much support as you can, the both of you. Many times in this case, again, like you mentioned, we tend to pay more attention to the mother because we think they have the physical wounds, but oftentimes the psychological wounds are a little more painful than the physical wounds. And it's something we shouldn't avoid. We should talk about it, reach out, get help, have a support system. We're going to talk about this a lot more as we conclude in terms of what next, how do we go about it now that we know how do we prevent it, how do we approach it. We're going to talk about that, but I see the feeling is black. You feel alone. You've just posted it there.
Mm-hmm.
That is true, but it's because of what you're experiencing. That's why you feel that way. But you'll notice that once you start to speak, it's not going to be easy. But when you start to speak about it and to face it and to approach with it, the light starts to return. To use Obi's story, she shared with us in the last episode that when she started to have this community of people that she could share with what she was experiencing, when she finally had a name she could put to it, instantly she improved, to use her own words, 60%. Just from having people that she could talk to who could, share what she was going through and could relate to what was happening. That in itself is very therapeutic. If it is difficult, Agaba, I'd say it would be important for you to have a chat with a professional. We could get in touch and we could see how we can support you to be able to move through this particular situation. I know it's not easy. But it is doable. We can overcome this kind of experience. And I'd say that for now, but there is definitely a way out, and don't give up.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Faith, you have your hand up.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this amazing Google Meet. Actually, like I shared earlier, I didn't know this was happening. I was going through it, but then I just figured maybe because of my circumstance at the time, the fact that I wasn't ready and my family didn't want to hear it and cut me off. So I figured maybe that's the reason I was going through this particular kind of depression. But I want to know, is there a system that has been put in place, like during, for example, antenatals, to help us understand these particular things? Because one thing, as you're going, I remember as a first-time mom, I didn't know anything. And the fact that I was in hiding, because it was kind of an abomination. Why are you pregnant? How are you pregnant? How could you do that? It's a shame. So you reach antenatal and everyone is just really tired. Like, what has brought you here? You're like, oh, okay, I'm pregnant and what? They'd be like, fill in the chart, sit down. You enter, they check you, go home. No information whatsoever. You don't know how you're going to navigate this. You don't know what you're doing. You're just there, staggering. Until I approached my grandmom, who had been a midwife, and she filled me in on the basics, like feeding and, those basic things that they tell us to do while pregnant. But how are we going to how is there a system that is there in place, or how can this be changed? Because midwives are scary, really, really scary. They freak me out. Like every time I went there, it's like I was going to a principal's office and I had been suspended for something, because the first reaction is, what is it now? You know, you're due maybe in a week or two, and no one, like, you just have to kind of swim through the whole situation and figure out you need warm clothes for your child, you need this, mostly in government hospitals. You just have to find a way to figure it out, or ask advice from someone who has been there before. And there's so many mothers who have not been there, and they're just figuring it out and they don't know what to do. So is there a system in place, or if it's not there, how can it be done with help of psychologists? Or thank you.
Thank you for that. Dr. Agaba, do you have any information on the availability of this section in the antenatal care?
Thank you very much for sharing, Faith. And this is something that we've been for a long time crying for. Mental health is not something that's prioritized in our healthcare system. That's been a big challenge for a long time. I will not lie to you that it has finally been solved, far from it, but there is a push for us to improve, a big push for us to improve. And we have to teach, we have to support, we have to empower, we have to change the perspectives of the people, even healthcare workers. And Obi shared with us a story as well. She went to see her doctor, and the doctor did not know what was going on, right? Or did not care to listen and pay attention to. Of course, every doctor has had training in mental illness, and every doctor knows these things on the theoretical level. But because, again, of our cultural influences and because of the environments in which we live, oftentimes we're not paying attention, or we don't care enough to dig deep and actually ask the questions that count and provide the information that needs to be provided. So it's a big challenge, these things that we are not doing well enough in terms of our healthcare systems, and we have to improve. And it starts with me and you. We need to get the word out there. I mentioned earlier that I'm currently doing a training, a project that we were able to write, and we are training, nurses, midwives, to be able to screen, understand, detect, and manage these kinds of conditions. So there is definitely a step in the right direction. Still too little, but I like to celebrate even the small wins, and we know that together things will definitely change for the better ahead of us. So we need Faith on board, we need Obi on board, we need Nabuguzi on board, all of us together. We can start to raise the alarm and make noise, like they say, make noise. Yeah, but that's the only way we're going to start to see significant change in our healthcare delivery, in the way that we serve the people that need our help.
Yeah. But honestly, Dr. Agaba, I need to make an input here, because what Faith said, I thought this was only exclusive to Nigeria, because these frontline healthcare workers, honestly, they need reorientation and they need a lot of training. The first day I shared my experience with postpartum, just part of it on my mental health WhatsApp group, I remember this young woman in particular. She sent me a direct message and she says to me, look, so this is her story. There's another aspect medical people or frontline healthcare workers don't pay attention to, and that's moms struggling with breastfeeding. So this lady was, one of her breasts was, the baby rejected one breast for reasons we don't even know. The baby refused to suck that breast. And so it was just one breast. And you know what happens? The breast the baby is not sucking is, there's a lot of milk. It's swollen. It is painful. The mom is in a lot of discomfort. And what does she do? She goes to the hospital. And these nurses and midwives start to attack her, start to shame her. oh, you young mothers of these days, you don't pay attention. You're so careless. You're so this. You need to force the baby. She's like, but this is a newborn baby. How will I force this baby to take these breasts? You understand? So this is a young mom who's already struggling with her mental health because she doesn't even understand what's going on. And it's what Faith just said. You know how you get married and you just say, oh, okay, in 2 years, I'm just going to have 2 kids and that's it. And 10 years after, you don't even have one child. A lot of women go into this thing without having first-hand knowledge. You don't even know what to expect. In antenatal classes, what do they teach you? Oh, dance like this, do this when the baby is coming. Just ridiculous stuff. Nobody is having important conversations you need to have with moms. And you ask them and it's, oh, we don't want to make them afraid. We don't want to scare them. Come on. Even research. I've read extensively on postpartum depression and research has proven that when you educate yourself, when you prepare yourself for stuff, right, it prepares you 50 times more than moms who have not read anything on these things. For instance, as a first-time mom, I didn't know there was anything called cracked nipples. I didn't know about tears. I didn't know mothers even experienced that. There were so many things I didn't know till I had my baby and I was going for antenatal classes and nobody even bothered to tell me these things. So honestly, our frontline healthcare people are just a huge, let me not say they're a huge part of the problem, but honestly, they need a lot of retraining and reorientation on how to show empathy. That's the first thing. It's part of your job. Show empathy. Show that you care. You understand? I don't want to take up all our time, but that's what I have to say in contribution to where we are now in our discussions on the topic.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for your contributions. We have truly come to the end of the conversation. Someone joined in at the very last minute. Patrick Ogwal, you've missed the largest part of the conversation. You've actually missed the whole of the conversation. You've only found the soup from the beef, I think. You will be able to catch the whole conversation tomorrow on the podcast. It is going to be published. So let us all join hands and clap for our
before we do
resident psychologist. You can share.
Thank you very much. Just before we do, I think just one last thing that we haven't tackled, and I think we should, before we wrap up. We've mentioned a couple of things around this, but I just wanted to reiterate and just add my voice to that. So how do we prevent it? Okay, so we've talked about what it's like. We've talked about how to treat it. Is it preventable? Yes. How do we prevent it? I'll just mention this very quickly so that we can wrap up.
Yeah.
One, information. I could say it in capital letters if that were possible. We need to arm ourselves with the right information of what this illness is. We need to arm ourselves with the right information of what this childbirth is, what being a parent is. So information. You need to know as much as you can. Moses shared with us how he kept reading. He was always 2-3 steps ahead. Very important. And we should go out there and study and read. Someone mentioned about being an intentional parent. Very beautiful. Okay, so very important for us to read. Arm yourself. Information is, in this case, very much power. So the more you know, the better prepared you'll be. You'll know what to expect. You'll know what not to expect. What could go well, what may not go as it has been pictured and presented. So, the good, the bad as well. Okay, we have a tendency to want to shy away from what is not necessarily very pretty, but we need to know what that is as well. What could possibly not go as it should be, as well as what is going to be right. They say you prepare for the worst, plan for the best, prepare for the worst, right? So important for us to know. Information is very, very important. 2, social support. I can't underestimate, I can't overemphasize how important it is to have a social support system around you. People that are going to walk with you along this journey to support you. They shouldn't come when you get postpartum depression. They should be there from the beginning. Okay? So, having the right midwives, having the right, obstetrician, the right gynecologist, having your friends with you throughout this process, having your family with you, having your partner walking alongside you is very, very important for you to be able to navigate through, this whole time, and to ensure that you're able to come out of it very well. So having that support system, taking time to ensure that, you have people around you that you're working with that know what's going on. It's important to talk about what you feel and what you're experiencing. Okay, so have people that you can share with very honestly. That's very, very important. And we also encourage, physical activity, have, things that you do that make you happy, have, hobbies. We talk about exercise and sports. Very, very important. We tend to neglect this, but this is very important for our mental health. Eating right, our diet, important for us to pay a lot of attention to that. Getting enough sleep is also very important for us. I'll just mention those three for now. And so with this package, we can actually ensure that we don't find ourselves in postpartum depression. And if we do, and I'll just end with this, if we do, that's not the end. There is a lot of support that you can get. There's treatment. Seek out the professionals around you, and you can be helped.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Agaba. Can we clap for him again? I'm doing a screen record just to have this moment captured. For us clapping for our resident psychiatrist. See how I am lowering.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Do have a good night. Thank you to everyone that has showed up for the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye, my favorite doctor.
OB.
Yes.
Whoever has missed this conversation, those that you know that feel like should have been part of the conversation, do let them know that it is going to be live tomorrow on the podcast. Wednesday, the conversation will be live and you will catch the whole conversation. Patrick, you'll catch the conversation. Priska, at some point you are here with us, but you'll be able to catch whatever you missed. Thank you so much for everyone present. Moses, Faith, Obi, Jagaban, Agwal, Priska, myself, yes, and Father Gaston. Do have a good night.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.